My name is Shirley, and I'm a 31-year-old office employee. A year ago, I tied the knot with Mason, a man I met on a blind date. After dating for a year and a half, he proposed to me. I had always dreamed of settling down, so even though the proposal felt a bit rushed, I accepted. Looking back now, I realize I should have been more careful. Shortly after our wedding, Mason made the unexpected choice to change careers. When I questioned him about it, he explained that his old job wasn't giving him the opportunity to fully utilize his abilities. What shocked me more was that he had already quit and would be leaving at the end of the month. Fortunately, he found a new position quickly, but it paid less than his previous job. At first, I didn't think too much about it because I had my own job, but then Mason began pressuring me to leave mine. I might have considered it if his new salary had been enough to support both of us, but given the pay cut he had taken, that wasn't the case. He kept saying it would increase soon, but there were no signs of when that would actually happen. Leaving my job in such uncertain financial conditions felt irresponsible. We depended on my income for savings and essential expenses like rent and car payments. Relying solely on Mason's current salary was simply not feasible. One evening, he handed me divorce papers, seemingly as a way to scare me. "You know I'm ready for this anytime," he said, almost daring me. I urged him to calm down and think before speaking, but he just walked away and shut himself in the bedroom. That moment made me reflect on the impulsive decisions and unexpected shifts that had occurred since I met Mason. I made it clear to him that I wouldn't quit my job until his salary improved. Initially, he seemed to understand, but the issue kept resurfacing. Every time he brought it up, I stood firm, giving him the same answer. Now, a year into our marriage, Mason's salary remains the same, yet he continues to pressure me to resign. "When are you finally going to quit?" he would ask, and while I often wanted to reply with a sarcastic comment, I held back. I knew our financial stability depended on my job. If it was so important for me to quit, I believed Mason should work harder on advancing his own career instead. As time went by, I started to understand why Mason was so insistent on me leaving work. It became apparent during our visits to his parents' house. Whenever we were with his mother, Martha, Mason would act concerned, saying he wanted to relieve her of any burdens. She would thank him, and then he'd glance at me, signaling that I should consider quitting. He suggested that his mom needed help, but Martha was far from dependent. She was active, healthy, and even had a part-time job that funded her hobbies and social activities. Clearly, she didn't need me to assist her, yet Mason kept pushing for me to quit. "If one of us could be home during the day, we could check on Mom regularly," Mason mentioned one day. It was obvious he envisioned me taking on the role of caretaker for his mother, which felt unnecessary and overwhelming. I directly asked him what he expected me to do, given that Martha was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. He rattled off a list of tasks like helping with chores and running errands. It was clear he had a plan for me, but none of it justified giving up my career. The continuous requests and justifications were wearing me down. I needed Mason to see that while I was willing to help his family if necessary, quitting my job without a compelling reason was not a decision I could make lightly. "But doesn't Martha have her part-time job and spend most of her days with her friends?" I pointed out when he suggested I could help around the house. His reply left me confused. Was he really expecting me to become his mother's personal maid? Mason seemed more preoccupied with maintaining appearances, especially in front of his parents. If he was so intent on helping them, why couldn't he manage the chores himself? Despite the constant pressure, I stood firm in my decision to keep working. I also stopped visiting my in-laws on my day off, although I still made an effort to see them during major holidays like New Year's. Reflecting on our visits, I noticed a pattern. Mason often expected me to take on tasks like cleaning or assisting his mom, and I pushed back. When he asked me to run errands, I would respond, "Don't you know this area better than I do?" His usual excuse was that it wouldn't look right if he did it himself, an explanation I found both odd and manipulative. It became clear that Mason was more focused on controlling the situation and creating an image of family care than on genuinely supporting his parents or me. Over time, my view of Mason shifted. It was evident that he cared more about appearances than about showing real love or respect for me. When I finally confronted him, asking why he didn't help out or even consider quitting his job to care for his mom, his reaction said it all. He looked uncomfortable and disgusted, replying, "That's not something I'm supposed to make sure you do this," Mason began. "I'm giving you these instructions so my mom thinks you're thoughtful and helpful. You should be thankful for how generous I'm being." His words were telling. Essentially, He wanted to dump all the hard work on me while portraying himself as some kind of saint, but I'm not his servant, nor am I beneath him, and I certainly didn't deserve to be demeaned in front of his family. It became more apparent that Mason's priorities were skewed. He cared more about appearances than real partnership and support. If he continued with these unreasonable demands, I wasn't going to stay silent. I stood my ground. Despite many discussions, Mason didn't change. He kept pestering me with the same question, "Are you quitting your job yet?" And every time we visited his parents, he continued to boss me around as if nothing had changed. Reaching my breaking point, I knew we needed a serious conversation. "We need to talk about what's next for us," I said, trying to steer the discussion toward something meaningful. "What are you trying to say?" Mason replied, irritated. "I'm tired. I'm fed up with you constantly asking me to quit my job and pressuring me to look after Martha," I said, laying out my frustrations. "Why are you so mad about that? You're my wife, and it's your responsibility to help with my parents," Mason shot back. "Do you think it's fair for me to shoulder all of that? Shouldn't you, their own child, be helping out with the chores and care?" I challenged, confronting his outdated thinking. "No way, it's the wife's job to do it. What kind of person doesn't care about family?" Mason snapped, clearly displeased with my pushback. "I'm disappointed in you." Seeing an opportunity to expose the double standard, I asked, "Then what about my parents? Have you ever cared for them? If I asked you to help them, would you?" Mason stared at me blankly, unable to grasp the connection. "What are you talking about? Why should a husband be responsible for his wife's parents?" "So does that mean you'll never help my parents?" I pressed, pointing out his hypocrisy. "The husband's parents and the wife's parents aren't the same," Mason said, still missing the point entirely. "How does that make any sense?" I asked, growing more exasperated. "I didn't realize you were so backward. You sound just like my old boss." "What are you trying to say?" Mason asked, confused. "I'm saying that both of us should care for our own parents, and support each other's family too," I replied, hoping to highlight the importance of equality and mutual support. I added, "So you only prioritize your blood relatives? I'm really disappointed. I won't be visiting your parents anymore." "Why are you acting like this? Enough already. I want you to stop with the nonsense," Mason retorted, clearly angered. "No, how dare you talk to me like that? My mom was right," Mason fumed. "Huh, your mom was talking about you. She said you're a lousy husband," I snapped back. "That's why she gave me this," Mason said, pulling out a piece of paper from his bag. It was divorce papers. "What, you had those ready?" I asked, shocked, but Mason looked oddly pleased with himself. "See, I knew this would scare you. I'm ready for this anytime, so think about what you just said," Mason smugly stated before walking away to his room. Unbelievable, how could Mason be so self-centered? His satisfaction was obvious. It was clear that the divorce papers were just a tool to manipulate me, and with Martha involved, it confirmed my suspicions. Mason was acting like a puppet for his mom, trying to control me under her influence. It was absurd. I wouldn't let him manipulate me. Couldn't he see how his actions were damaging our marriage? The next day, after Mason left for work, I filled out the divorce papers myself and submitted them. To safeguard my decision, I also filed a notice to block any future attempts from him to file the marriage certificate on his own. I called my parents to explain the situation. At first, they were shocked, but once they heard everything, they fully supported my decision. Angry at Mason's behavior, they immediately offered to help me move my belongings. I took time off work, and with my parents' help, we moved all my things to their house while Mason was away. I decided to stay with my parents for a while. It felt good to be back home, comfortable and peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in months. Reflecting on my marriage, I realized that Mason had never really pulled his weight. I was the one who cooked after long workdays, cleaned, and did all the laundry on my days off. On top of that, he expected me to care for his parents, which was just unreasonable. Later that evening, Mason called, probably just home from work. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice tense. "I'm at my parents' house," I replied calmly. "What? Why would you go back there without telling me? And where's all your stuff? Don't tell me you're staying the night," he said, a mix of surprise and entitlement in his voice. I nearly laughed at how unaware Mason was of the gravity of the situation, assuming I was just staying the night when I had already packed most of my belongings. "I'm not coming back," I stated firmly. "What do you mean? Come back and make me dinner," he demanded. "Cook for yourself," I said, cutting the call. I couldn't have a serious conversation about divorce with someone so dismissive. To give myself space, I blocked his number and decided to wait for him to come to my parents' house. A week later, Mason showed up at my parents' home with his own parents. They looked serious, and it was 3 against 3 in the living room. "How could you leave without my permission?" Mason asked, sounding both angry and bewildered. "You've been treating me like a servant, Mason. All I asked was for you to take some responsibility for your family," I responded, standing firm. "That's not true. What kind of wife doesn't take care of her husband's family?" Martha interjected, glaring at me. My father clenched his fists in anger, but I stepped in. Mason wanted me to quit my job and care for Martha, claiming it was my duty as his wife, but when it came to my own family, he expected me to handle everything on my own. He wanted obedience, using me to care for his parents while taking the credit for himself. That's why he values his parents over mine. "Have you ever heard him say these things?" I asked. Martha continued to glare, but Liam, Mason's father, looked confused, as if he hadn't known the full story. Mason, trying to shift the blame, waved the divorce papers. "This was Martha's idea all along." Liam turned to him, shocked. "What are you saying?" Martha stammered. "Well, Camilla has been difficult." "Did you really say Camilla's parents don't matter?" I pressed. "It's only natural that our parents come first," Martha said defensively. Liam, shaking his head, said, "I came here thinking Camilla had been mistreated, but it's clear who's in the wrong. Don't use her parents as an excuse to manipulate the situation," he scolded, making Mason slump in his seat. Turning to me and my parents, Liam offered an apology. "I'm truly sorry for my son's behavior." "There's no need to apologize for something you didn't do," I replied, "but there's something else I need to say." I faced Mason. "The divorce papers you gave me, I've already filed them. We're no longer married." Mason and Martha went pale. "How could you file those without my consent?" Mason shouted. "You told me I could file them whenever I wanted, and you even had Martha sign as a witness," I explained calmly, leaving him at a loss for words. Liam, angered by Mason's childish behavior, slapped him across the face. Martha recoiled at the scene. "I'm sorry you had to witness this. You have every right to divorce this fool," Liam said, gripping Mason by the collar and demanding apologies from both him and Martha before escorting them out of the house. Afterward, I thanked Liam for his support. He assured me that Mason's assets and property would be transferred to me without any issue, given my higher income and the effort I had put into maintaining our household. Later, I found out Liam had divorced Martha. Disgusted by her actions, I also bumped into one of Mason's former colleagues who revealed that Mason had quit his job after performing poorly and being criticized by his boss. He had switched to another job, making even less money, which further solidified my relief at ending the marriage. Now, I feel free. I've rented a cozy apartment, and my career is thriving. I even received a recent promotion. I'm not interested in dating right now. I'm focused on myself and my future. Mason was always more concerned with appearances than genuine effort, both at home and in his career. It's unfortunate how some people use divorce threats as a power play. It's a major mistake. I hope they find their own happiness one day. As for me, I'm grateful to have moved on and look forward to the possibility of finding someone special when the time is right. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay tuned.